Picture a contract, a legal document, the kind that the moment you sign it makes you disappear. Not dead, not imprisoned, not exiled to some distant colony, just gone, dissolved, absorbed like a drop of ink into a much larger body of water. You had a name, you had opinions, you had in theory a soul. And then, on a Tuesday's morning in a church in London, a man said some words, and a clergyman said some other words back, and a ring went onto your finger, and just like that, quietly, legally, completely, you ceased to exist, not as a body. Your body was still very much there. It was, in fact, about to be considerably more demanded of than it had ever been before. But as a person, as someone who could own property, make contracts, go to court, decide where to live or what to spend or whether to leave, that person was gone. Welcome to marriage in England, 1753. A system so thoroughly, so completely, so almost impressively designed to erase one party to its benefit that lawyers had a special word for it: coverture, from the old French, to cover, to put a roof over something. The idea being that a husband covers his wife, protects her, shelters her, represents her, so thoroughly that she has no need of a separate legal existence of her own. She is feme covert, a covered woman. You're probably thinking, well, yes, but that was 300 years ago. That was medieval, barbaric, long since fixed. It was fixed, by the way, eventually, the Married Women's Property Act of 1882, which means it took until 1882 for England to agree that a woman should be allowed to keep her own wages after marriage. 1882, not 1382, not 1582. The year Thomas Edison was lighting up New York City with electricity, so no, this is not ancient history. This is your great-great-grandmother's problem. Possibly your great-grandmother's, and tonight we're going to live it. Not from the outside, not as a historian politely explaining the structures, but from the inside. One woman, one life, one marriage in a city that smells of coal smoke and horse dung, and underneath it all the river, always the river, threading through everything like a dark and indifferent god. I make these history stories, and I genuinely do not know if you fall asleep to them or if you're lying there fully awake, increasingly upset about a legal system that has been dead for 150 years and yet somehow feels very personal. Either way, subscribe if you want, find a comfortable position, close your eyes. Here we go. Your eyes open to a room you've slept in for 19 years. The ceiling has a crack in it, a long diagonal line running from the window to the chimney breast. You've been staring at that crack since you were old enough to stare at things. You know every inch of it. Where it widens slightly, about 2/3 of the way across. Where it narrows to nothing near the window frame, disappearing into the plaster. This is the last morning you will wake up in this room. That thought arrives before you're fully conscious, before you've remembered what day it is, before the sounds of Cheapside filtering up from the street have registered, the cartwheels on cobblestones, the distant shout of a vendor, the bells of St. Mary le Bow beginning their morning performance 6 streets away. The thought is just there, complete, final, last morning. The smell of the room is familiar to the point of invisibility. Candle wax, cold now from last night's stub on the windowsill. The faint sweetness of the dried lavender your mother tucks into the linen press. Something underneath that, something older. The smell of the walls themselves, of a house that has held the same family for 20 years, that has absorbed every meal and every argument and every bout of illness, and every Sunday morning into its plaster and its timber. You breathe it in. You know, the way you know things without being told, that this smell will be different at Mr. Caldwell's house. Everything will be different at Mr. Caldwell's house. The ceiling will not have a crack in it. The walls will not smell like you. The candle stub on the windowsill has burned itself down to nothing. You lit it last night, telling yourself you just needed light to read. Your mother's prayer book, the Book of Common Prayer, the familiar words of the marriage service you've heard a dozen times at other people's weddings and somehow never expected to apply to yourself. Wilt thou have this man to thy wedded husband, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Wilt thou obey him and serve him, love, honour, and keep him in sickness and in health, and forsaking all other, keep thee only unto him, so long as ye both shall live? There it is. Right in the words, obey him. Right there. No hedging, no softening, no footnotes explaining that this is a spiritual aspiration, rather than a legal requirement. Obey him. You lie still in the grey morning light, listening to London wake up, and you think about that word. The sounds from downstairs begin around 6. Your mother, up early, she's always up early. You cannot remember a morning of your life when your mother was not already moving somewhere in the house when you woke. Her footsteps crossing the kitchen floor, the scrape of the iron pot against the hearth, the particular sound of the bellows working to coax the banked fire back to life. Then your father, heavier-footed, crossing from bedroom to landing to stairs, his morning cough. That cough he's had for 5 years now, since the winter that laid him low for 6 weeks and left him changed, resounding through the timbers of the house, and underneath it all, the street. Cheapside in October 1753 is already awake at first light. This is the commercial spine of London. The shops will open within the hour. The carters are already moving their loads. Milk sellers are at work. The P-men are setting up their trays. The noise builds the way it always builds, layer by layer, until by 8 o'clock it is a continuous roar, a living thing, as much a part of the air as the cold smoke and the smell of the river. You have lived inside this noise for 19 years. You have fallen asleep to it and woken to it and walked through the middle of it so many times it has become transparent to you like glass, present but not seen. You wonder if Mr. Caldwell's house is quiet. It is near Chancery Lane, a different kind of street from this one. Solicitors and barristers and their clerks, men of the law, quieter commerce, the trade in words rather than goods. You have been to the house exactly twice. Once when your father took you to meet Mr. Caldwell properly, after the arrangements were first discussed. Once when you went with your mother to assess the domestic situation, the kitchen, the servants' quarters, the parlour where you would receive visitors. Both times you stood in the rooms and smiled and said the correct things and felt the walls, watching you, deciding whether or not to let you in. The house has 3 stories, a respectable address, a cook and a housemaid, both already installed, with the expectation that you, as the new Mrs. Caldwell, will take over the management of the household. That is your role. Manager of the house. That is what a wife does. Your mother's footsteps are on the stairs. She opens your door without knocking. She never knocks. She has not knocked since the door was first put on its hinges. This is one of those habits that will no longer apply after today, and you both know it without saying so. She's carrying a cup of something hot, small beer warmed with a poker and flavoured with nothing in particular. Your mother's version of tea, which is too expensive for daily use. She sets it on the windowsill beside the dead candle stub. She looks at you. You look at her. The dress is ready, she says. Mrs. Hodgson brought it back last night after you were asleep. Is it? It's fine. She did a good job. A pause. Better than I expected for what we paid her. This is your mother's high praise. Better than expected. She sits on the edge of the bed. She's 43 years old. She has had 5 children, of whom you and your brother Thomas and your sister Anne are the surviving 3. She has run a household on a linen draper's income for 20 years. Her hands resting in her lap are the hands of a woman who has worked every day of her adult life, roughened, capable, with the faint ink stain on her right index finger that never quite fades. She looks at those hands for a moment. Then she looks at you. He's a good man, she says. Mr. Caldwell. Your father has known him for years. He's established. He'll provide for you. You wait. You have the feeling, the old familiar feeling you have had since you were 12, perhaps, that there is more coming, that your mother has things to say that she is deciding right now whether to say. She picks up the cup of small beer from the windowsill, holds it out to you. You sit up and take it. It's warm. It tastes like metal and yeast and morning. Your grandmother, your mother says. Then she stops. You wait. Your grandmother told me something the night before my wedding. She said, the house will show you what kind of man he is. Not the parlour, not the dining room, the kitchen, the larder. How the servants stand when he walks in. Whether they look at the floor. She stands. She smooths her apron. She looks out the window at Cheapside below, the street she has lived on since she married your father at 18, the street that has been the entire world of her adult life. Watch the servants, she says, the first week. She leaves before you can ask what she means. It takes an hour to get into the dress. Not because it is elaborate, it is not. This is not a gown for a grand society wedding. This is the dress of a tradesman's daughter marrying a respectable solicitor. Good fabric, yes, your father's. Business providing for that much. A pale blue silk with darker blue trim, made up by Mrs. Hodgson, the dressmaker in Aldersgate Street. 3 fittings over the course of 6 weeks. It takes an hour because getting dressed in 1753 for a woman is a process. First, the shift. Linen, white, long-sleeved, the foundation of everything. Then, the stays. Not the bone-crushing corsets of 100 years earlier. Fashions have shifted. Waists are less tortured by 1753, but still a structured undergarment that your mother laces for you from behind, pulling the back laces snug, not tight enough to make breathing impossible, but tight enough to make breathing something you are aware of, something you have to think about. The stays give you the correct shape, a smooth conical torso, slightly elongated, the fashionable silhouette of the 1750s. You're being constructed right now before your eyes. Your real body, the body that gets tired and sweats and takes up impractical amounts of space, is being organised into a form that will be presentable to the world. Then, the hooped petticoat. Not a full court hoop. Those things are enormous, absurd, the kind of structure that requires you to turn sideways to go through doorways. But a moderate hoop, enough to give the skirt the right shape, enough to add a foot of width on each side. Your sister Anne ties it on for you. She is 16 and watching your wedding preparations with a mixture of excitement and something more complicated that she's trying not to show on her face. Does it feel different? She asks as she ties the tapes at your waist. It's the same as always. It just takes longer to put on. I mean, does it feel different? Knowing. You consider this. You're standing in your shift and stays and hooped petticoat in your bedroom, the crack in the ceiling above you, London noisy outside the window. Ask me tomorrow, you say. Anne looks at you. She has your mother's directness, your father's eyes. What if I ask? You in a year, she says. You don't answer. Neither of you speak again while she laces the over petticoat over the hoop, while your mother comes back and helps lift the blue dress over your head, while the tiny hooks are fastened one by one up your back, while your hair is pinned and arranged and the small lace cap settled over it. By the time you're dressed, you weigh approximately 20 pounds more than you did in bed. Between the stays and the petticoats and the dress itself, you're carrying a structure. The structure is beautiful. Mrs. Hodgson did good work. The pale blue sits well against your complexion, and the trim catches the morning light coming through the window. You look in the small mirror your mother holds up. The woman looking back at you is someone you are still in the process of recognizing. Beautiful, your mother says. Her voice is perfectly level. You'll do your father credit. There is the smell of her in the room, soap, lavender, the faint under-scent of the kitchen, of the life she has lived for 20 years in this house. You breathe it in. One last time. St. Clement Danes is a 5-minute walk from where you stand, but in these clothes, on these streets, it takes longer. London crowds do not part for wedding parties. London crowds do not care about wedding parties. You move through Cheapside and down toward the Strand, and then up toward the church. Your father on your right arm, your mother ahead with Anne, Thomas bringing up the rear with the look of a boy of 17 who is very aware that his collar is too tight and his patience is limited. And around you, London continues at full volume, the smell of the Strand, horse dung first, always, the eternal bass note of any London street, cart grease, coal smoke drifting from 1,000 chimneys in a thin grey haze that sits 20 feet up, somewhere between you and the sky. From a cookshop on the left, the smell of roasting meat, some kind of bird, the fat spitting and charring, and the sour yeast smell of fresh bread from the bakery opposite. A pig, a large and entirely unconcerned pig, roots through a pile of refuse against one wall. It glances at your procession with small, intelligent eyes and returns to its business. 2 street boys stop to watch you pass. One of them shouts something. Your father pretends not to hear. Your mother's back remains straight and impervious. You hear it. It is not unkind. Just loud the way London is loud, the way everything here is conducted at a volume slightly higher than necessary. St. Clement Danes rises ahead of you. Wren built it, rebuilt it, the original having burned in the Great Fire of 1666, 87 years ago. Though it feels like last week when you stand in front of the result, those pale Portland stone walls rising against the grey sky, this steeple that can be seen from half a mile in any direction. Oranges and lemons say the bells of St. Clement's. That nursery rhyme has been running through your head since you woke up and you cannot get it out. The bells of St. Clement's. They hang up there, those bells, the famous ones, and they watch this church receive one wedding party after another, year after year, century after century, and they ring the same notes over every single one of them. You go up the steps. Inside, the smell changes entirely. Stone and old incense and the particular coolness of a building that has not warmed up yet. It is October, and cold has settled into the walls overnight. Candle wax burning, damp wool from the few waiting guests arranged in the front pews. Mr. Caldwell is already there. He stands at the front of the church near the altar, his back to you as you process up the aisle. And for a moment, just a moment, the space of 2 steps, you have the strange sensation of looking at a stranger. Because he is, in the ways that matter most, still a stranger. You've been in his company perhaps 8 times. 8 formal visits, all conducted in parlours and drawing rooms, all carefully supervised, all following the correct rituals of courtship that have nothing to do with... He turns. He's 34 years old, not tall but straight-backed, with the posture of a man who considers how he appears in any room. Dark coat, good quality. His wig powdered correctly. He has a long face, not unpleasant. The kind of face that looks like it is accustomed to making assessments. He is a solicitor. He reads documents all day. He has been trained to look at things and determine whether they are what they claim to be. He looks at you now with an expression you cannot entirely read. Approval, perhaps. Satisfaction. The look of a man who has negotiated correctly. You smile. You have been practicing this smile. Your father gives your arm to Mr. Caldwell, and the transaction is thus complete before the ceremony has even started. The Reverend Aldwych begins. Dearly beloved, we are gathered together here in the sight of God, and in the face of this congregation, to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony. The words are familiar. You have heard them at the weddings of your cousin Jane, of your friend Elizabeth Price before she became Elizabeth Cartwright, of Mrs. Hodgson's niece last spring. The same words every time. You have never stood on this side of them before, not by any to be enterprised, nor taken in hand, unadvisedly, lightly, or wantonly, to satisfy men's carnal lusts and appetites, like brute beasts that have no understanding, but reverently, discreetly, advisedly, soberly, and in the fear of God. The cold of the stone floor seeps up through your shoes. Your feet are already going slightly numb. Thin-soled wedding shoes, not designed for standing still on cold church floors. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better for worse, for richer for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love, cherish, and to obey, till death us do part according to God's holy ordinance, and thereto I give thee my troth. Your voice says the words, you hear it as if from a small distance to obey. Mr. Caldwell's voice says his version, to love and to cherish, not to obey. Men do not promise obedience, men promise to love, women promise both. The ring comes out. With this ring I thee wed, with my body I thee worship, and with all my worldly goods I thee endow. The ring slides onto your finger, gold, heavy, or it feels heavy, the weight of it on your hand, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. The Reverend Aldwych closes his book. You are, from this moment, Mrs. Mary Caldwell. Mary Whitmore is gone. She has been legally covered, absorbed. She will not appear in any court record, any contract, any deed of property, any legal document of any kind, unless as an appendage to her husband's name. She cannot make a will without his permission. She cannot keep her own earnings. She cannot sign a contract. She cannot sue anyone, and nobody can sue her, because there is no independent legal entity to sue. She is covered. She's protected. She is gone. The bells of St. Clement Danes begin to ring overhead. Oranges and lemons, the same as always, the same notes, the same intervals, ringing over weddings before yours and after yours and for as long as the stone walls stand. You smile at your husband. He smiles back. The congregation applauds quietly, in the way of people who are cold and ready for the wedding breakfast. The wedding breakfast is at your father's house. cold ham and pickled fish, and a game pie that Mrs. Ruck, the cook, has been working on since yesterday. Wine from a bottle your father has been saving since your brother Thomas was born. Cake, dense and dark with fruit, the kind that keeps for months. Your mother moves through the gathering efficiently, making sure everyone has what they need, making sure the conversation flows, making sure nothing is awkward or insufficient. She's been running events in this house for 20 years. She does it the way she does everything, competently without display. You watch her. You think, this is what she has, this house, this management, this competence that fills every room. You think, will I have that? By 3 o'clock, it is time to go. Your trunk has already been sent ahead. Your clothes and books and the small personal items that now constitute the entire physical record of your previous existence. Your mother has packed it, because you're not capable of deciding what to take and what to leave. She made the decisions for you. She's good at decisions. At the door, she holds you for a moment, longer than a moment. She smells like soap and kitchen and Cheapside. Like 19 years. Watch the servants, she says again into your hair, low enough that no one else hears. Then she lets go. The carriage, a hired carriage, Mr. Caldwell not yet prosperous enough for his own, moves away from the house. You watch out the window as Cheapside recedes. The familiar shop fronts. The pig, still there, still rootling. The 2 street boys from this morning already doing something else entirely. Your father's linen shop, the modest sign above the door. Whitmore and Son, linen drapers, established 1726. Your grandfather started it. Your father grew it. Your brother will inherit it. It passes from view. You face forward. The house on Chancery Lane is narrower than it appears from the street. That is the first thing you notice. The street facade looks substantial. 3 windows across, 3 stories up, painted door with a brass knocker. But inside the rooms are compressed, the hallway barely wide enough for 2 people to pass comfortably. This is London. London does not waste space. The cook is Mrs. Parr. She is 50 and she knows it, and she's not interested in pretending otherwise. She has a face like a side of beef that has been left in the sun, the same colour, the same texture, the same suggestion of toughness and longevity. She has been working in this house for 8 years, since before Mr. Caldwell moved in, since the previous occupant. She does not come out to greet you. You find this out because the housemaid, a girl named Bridget with red hair and eyes that are evaluating you very carefully, tells you that Mrs. Parr is occupied with the supper preparations and sends her regards. Her regards, you say. Yes, ma'am, Bridget says. Her face is perfectly neutral. Watch the servants, your mother said. Bridget's face tells you something. You file it away for later. The house has a parlour at the front, respectable, furnished with the moderate ambition of a man who has reached a comfortable station and intends to stay there. The carpet is good, the chairs are good, the fire is laid but not yet lit, the dining room behind it, small, a table for 6 people that makes the room feel complete, a study at the back where Mr. Caldwell does his work when he brings it home. You look through the open door. Shelves of books, legal texts mostly, some history, 1 or 2 volumes of a different kind that you cannot read from the doorway. A desk, large, set square to the window to catch the best light. Papers arranged in neat piles. The study door is open now, but you understand without being told that this door being open means nothing about whether it will be open to you later. This is his room. This is where his work lives. You will not be in this room unless invited. The kitchen is in the basement. You go down the narrow stairs and into the heat. A good fire going. Mrs. Parr at the range. The smell of meat and root vegetables and the particular fug of a kitchen that has been cooking all day. Mrs. Parr does not look up when you enter. This is the first test. You know it is a test. She knows you know it is a test. That is what makes it interesting. Mrs. Parr, you say, I understand supper is in hand. It is. Still not looking up. Her hands are working something at the range. Basting, you think. Something large in the big iron pot. What have we tonight? Now she looks up, briefly. Her eyes do what Bridget's eyes did. Assess, measure, decide. Mutton, she says, with turnips. Bread from this morning. Thank you. A pause. I'll look at the larder tomorrow when I have a chance to get acquainted with what we have. A very long pause. As you like, says Mrs. Parr. She goes back to her busting. You go back upstairs. You have not won that exchange exactly, but you have not lost it either. You made clear that you exist, that you are present, that you will be involved. Mrs. Parr has noted it. Whether she likes it is another matter entirely. Your husband is in the parlour now, the fire lit, his coat changed for a house coat, a glass of something in his hand. He looks comfortable. He looks like a man in his own house, which is exactly what he is. How do you find it? He asks. Very pleasant, you say. Mrs. Parr seems capable. She's been here longer than I have. A far, slight smile. Better not to cross her. You smile back. I'll bear that in mind. There is a particular quality to the silence of a house at night when that house is not yet familiar to you. Your own room, your parents' house, the crack in the ceiling, had a silence you knew completely. The settling of the timbers as temperature dropped, the particular creak of the third stair, the way the windows rattled in a certain wind from the northeast. This house has its own silences, its own settlements and creaks. You do not know them yet. They come to you as you lie in the dark listening, as foreign as a language you have not yet learned. The bedroom is larger than yours on Cheapside, a proper bed hung with dark curtains, a washstand with a basin, and a pitcher of water that Bridget brought up before she went down for the night. A small fire burning low now, but still throwing enough heat to keep the chill at arm's length. Mr. Caldwell, your husband, James. He asked you to call him. James, after the ceremony, though it still sits strangely in your mouth. He's lying beside you, and he is not quite asleep yet. You can tell by his breathing. The candle is out. The city outside the window is quieter here than on Cheapside, but not quiet. London is never quiet. There is always someone awake somewhere. Always a cart, always a voice, always the distant bark of a dog or the clatter of late-night trade. You lie still. This is the part nobody warned you about with any precision. Your mother, preparing you, if you could call it that, gave you information the way she gave you information about most important things, factually, briefly, without sentiment. There will be adjustments, she said, last week. Sitting at the kitchen table in the morning over bread and small beer while your father was in the shop and Anne and Thomas were not yet up. Adjustments, you said. He is your husband. You understand what that means. You understood what it meant in the abstract. You had been raised in London. You were not entirely ignorant. You had sisters and cousins who had married before you, though none of them had talked to you with any directness about the particular adjustments involved. Adjustments. There is the weight of him in the bed, the warmth, the entirely new reality of this. of another person's body in the same space as yours, close enough to hear breathe, close enough to feel the heat coming off of them. You have never shared a bed with anyone except your sister as a child. The fire settles, a coal shifts, a small orange glow flares briefly through the gap in the bed curtains and goes out. The adjustments, you think, will take time. You wake before he does. The grey light is coming through the curtains. Curtains you haven't drawn fully, you were too tired last night to bother, and the fire has gone to ash. The room is cold, much colder than the bed. You can feel the temperature difference as a physical thing, the air against your face, while the rest of you is warm. For one heartbeat, half a heartbeat, you have forgotten where you are. Then you remember. And the first thought, the thought that arrives so quickly after remembering that it seems to have been waiting, is this: the house on Cheapside is not yours anymore. Nothing on Cheapside is yours anymore. Nothing anywhere is yours anymore. Not because you don't live there, but because yours is no longer a category that applies to you in any legally meaningful way. Your clothes, his property. Any money you might earn, his property. The small amount of money your father gave you as a wedding gift, £12 more than he could easily afford, pressed into your hand by your father's thready eyes, he would not admit to his property. If he spent it on his business expenses or on wine or on a horse he fancied, there would be nothing you could do about it. Nothing. You could not go to court. You could not make a complaint. You have no legal standing to complain. You are covered. You lie very still in the cold bedroom and listen to James Caldwell breathe. He is not a cruel man. You do not think he is a cruel man. Your father would not have chosen a cruel man for you. Your mother would have found out and told you. But his kindness, or his cruelty, or anything in between, those are the only levers available to you. The law offers you nothing. Society offers you the suggestion that a good husband will be generous and reasonable, and you should be grateful for it. Gratitude. You get up carefully so as not to wake him. The cold floor through your thin stockings. The cold air hitting your face. You find the pitcher on the washstand and pour a small amount into the basin. It's cold. Very cold. Last night's water. No fire in the room since the small hours. You wash your face. The cold water is at least clarifying. You look at your hands in the grey morning light. They do not look different. They feel different. The first week, watch the servants, Mrs. Pa runs the kitchen like a country she has governed for 20 years and expects to govern for 20 more. This is her domain. The stone-flagged basement with its large fireplace and its iron range and its shelves of copper pots and the larder off to the side, cool and dark, smelling of salt and flour and the faint ghost of last year's herbs. She wakes at 5. By 6 the fire is going, the water is on, bread is proving in the warming drawer. By 7 she is ready to receive your orders for the day, or more precisely, she is ready to accept your confirmation of what she has already decided to cook. This is the subtle thing. This is the thing that takes you a full week to understand. Mrs. Parr does not wait for your instructions. Mrs. Parr has her own system, developed over 8 years of running this kitchen for a bachelor solicitor who did not particularly care what he ate as long as it was hot and available at the correct hours. She'll tell you what she is planning to cook. She will nod when you agree. She will look at you with a particular expression if you suggest something different, not hostile, not dismissive, just carefully patient. The expression of a woman who has outlasted several attempts to change her methods and expects to outlast yours. You're smart enough to know you cannot fight this battle in the first week. You're in her house as much as in your husband's house. More in some ways. He's here in the evenings and on Sundays. You're here always. So you learn her system. You ask questions as if you are curious, not as if you are asserting authority. You learn that she makes white soup on Mondays, that she has a particular arrangement with the butcher in Bell Alley, a man named Turner, who is her cousin's husband, and who gives her a better price on meat that Mrs. Parr then does not reflect in the weekly accounts. That she considers the fishmonger on Fleet Street unreliable and prefers to go to a stall in the market on Tuesday mornings. You do not challenge the cousin's husband and the better price. You're not yet strong enough. But you start going to the market with Mrs. Parr on Tuesday mornings, under the guise of wanting to learn the suppliers, in practice, to see for yourself what is being bought, and at what price, and from whom. The market is Smithfield, a 20-minute walk north through streets that smell of animals and the particular pungency of the leatherworking trades. The air has a chill to it now, October deepening into November, and your breath makes small clouds in front of your face. Mrs. Parr walks quickly. She's been doing this walk for 8 years. She knows every turning, every shortcut, every stall where the quality is good and every stall where it is not. You keep up with her, your shoes on the cobblestones, the cold seeping up through the thin soles. The market is extraordinary. Even having grown up in London, even having been to markets before, there is something about Smithfield on a Tuesday morning that hits you fresh. The scale of it. Hundreds of stalls, hundreds of vendors, hundreds of transactions happening simultaneously. The shouting, the prices called out, the haggling, the smell of raw meat and live animals. There are still cattle in the market at this hour, waiting to be sold, their breath steaming in the cold air, their large eyes indifferent to the chaos around them. Mrs. Parr stops at a stall, examines a piece of pork, holds it up to the light, puts it down, moves to the next stall, examines, considers. "This one," she says finally to the vendor, and begins to negotiate. You watch her hands, capable, certain. She knows exactly what she's doing. She knows the quality, and she knows the price, and she knows this vendor's tells when he's trying to push inferior goods. The house will show you what kind of man he is, your mother said. Watch the kitchen. Mrs. Parr is the kitchen. Bridget is different. Bridget is 20, a year older than you, from somewhere in Ireland. She has not told you where, and you have not asked. She has been in London for 3 years. She has been in this house for 1. She is not Mrs. Parr. She has not yet calcified into certainty. She is still the person she is going to become, and she watches you with interest as if you might provide information relevant to that process. She is your ally. You know this before you could say exactly why. Something in the way she brings the morning coals up. She sets them down quietly, doesn't let the scuttle clang, because she has noticed that you're still half asleep, and she's decided to be considerate about it, without being asked, without anyone telling her to. Considers others without prompting. This is a useful quality in any person, and a rare one. Bridget, you say, on the 3rd morning while she's making up the fire. The study. Does Mr. Caldwell use it in the evenings always? Most evenings, ma'am, until about 9, sometimes later. And the parlour? He doesn't use the parlour much, unless there are guests. You have made a small discovery. The parlour, which is technically the room for receiving visitors and being respectable, is unused on most evenings, which means it is effectively yours. A room where you can sit and read and do needlework and exist without being underfoot. Not yours in any legal sense, but yours in practice. Practice, you are learning, is where life actually happens. The accounts. This is the part nobody told you about either. Not because it is private, but because it is simply assumed. Of course, you will keep the household accounts. All wives keep the household accounts. Your mother kept them, her mother before her. You are given a ledger, plain cloth-bound, already started by Mr. Caldwell in a neat cramped hand from the bachelor months, and a weekly sum for housekeeping, 3 shillings and 6 pence. This is what 3 shillings and 6 pence covers in November 1753 in London. Coal for the fires, approximately 10 shillings per chaldron, and a chaldron lasts 2 weeks in cold weather. Candles, good tallow ones, a shilling per dozen. Meat, variable, this being the knife edge of the whole operation. Bread, 4 pence a loaf, but you need 3 or 4 a week. Vegetables, cheap enough if you're careful. Soap, expensive enough to be managed carefully, and everything else. You sit at the kitchen table with the ledger and Mrs. Parr's receipts, and you learn what things cost. Not in the abstract, in the particular. This much for this thing on this day. The column of numbers that must add up to what was spent, and must not exceed what was given. It is mathematics. It is also judgment. You learn to look at a receipt from the butcher and know whether the weight recorded matches the weight of the meat you actually used in cooking, whether the price per pound is what the market supports. This is management. Real management. Not the decorative kind. The kind that keeps a household solvent. Your mother managed this. Her mother managed this. Every wife manages this in every house in London, and none of it is theirs. The money Mr. Caldwell gives you is his. The accounts you keep are records of his spending. If you save money by being clever, by finding a cheaper supplier, by substituting a less expensive cut of meat with clever cooking, the savings belong to him. If you overspend, you must account for it to him. The skill is yours. The work is yours. The money, legally, is not. Sunday. St. Dunstan in the West is your parish church on Chancery Lane. Close enough to walk, and walk you do, in your Sunday clothes, with Mr. Caldwell on your arm, which is exactly what this is meant to look like. The church, stone and glass, and the cold particular to old buildings that have absorbed 10,000 winters into their walls. The smell of it, candles and stone dust and damp cloth from the winter coats of 100 congregants. You sit in the Caldwell pew, the pew you are now entitled to sit in, as his wife. It is toward the front of the church, which is a statement. Not the very front. That is for actual gentry, of whom there are perhaps 4 families in this congregation, but respectable, middle, the pew of a man of business who has made something of himself. You sit straight-backed and listen to the Reverend Pemberton preach about the duties of wives. This is not an uncommon topic. You have heard versions of this sermon many times. The key texts are familiar. Ephesians 5:22, Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. 1 Peter 3:1, the whole apparatus of biblical authority deployed to explain what the law has already established, that wives are subordinate to husbands, that this is right and natural, that this is God's design. The Reverend Pemberton is not a cruel man either. He preaches this with an air of mild regret, as if he knows it is not what the women in his congregation want to hear, but it is what the text says, and he is bound by the text. Bound by the text. You think about being bound, about legal structures and textual structures, and how they reinforce each other. until the whole thing seems not like something that was decided, by men mostly, but like something that simply is, something natural, something written into the world. The woman in the pew in front of you has 3 children arranged beside her, 2 girls, a boy. The girls are very still, very straight-backed, miniature versions of their mother. The boy is fidgeting. His mother's hand reaches out and rests lightly on his knee. He stills. She's 30, perhaps 35. She looks older. This happens to women in London. The city ages you faster than the countryside, the work and the air and the endless demands of keeping a household running in a dense city. You do not know her name yet. After the service in the churchyard, while Mr. Caldwell speaks to another solicitor named Perkins about something related to a case, she introduces herself. "Mrs. Hammond," she says. "My husband is in trade on Fetter Lane. We've been in the parish 4 years." "Mrs. Caldwell," you say. "We're very new." "I know," she smiles, not unkindly. New faces are noticed. She looks at you for a moment with that particular assessment that you're beginning to recognise. The look that women in this city give each other. The looking at that is also a measure, a calculation, a reaching towards something unspoken. Who are you? What are you dealing with? Are you all right? "Come for tea," she says. "Thursday. My girls are always wanting company." You accept. Tea at Mrs. Hammond's house on Thursday is tea in the way that London tea always is, an elaborate performance of gentility that costs more than it looks, carried out in a small parlour with good china, and a fire that is larger than the fuel budget probably warrants, because appearances matter, and this is where they are made and maintained. Mrs. Hammond has 4 women in her parlour. You are Mrs. Fielding, who is the wife of a physician and carries herself accordingly. A young woman named Anne Pryor, who's been married for only 3 months and still has the look of a person who has not entirely processed what has happened to them, and a Mrs. Walton who is 63 and has been married for 40 years and whose presence seems designed to provide perspective. The tea is poured. The small cakes are distributed. The conversation begins. This is not idle conversation. This is information exchange. This is the network through which women in this city navigate a system that gives them almost no official power. You lean forward slightly in your chair without realizing you're doing it. Mrs. Walton, you discover, knows everything. Every cook who has left every household in the parish for the last 20 years and why. Every tradesman who cheats on weights. Every landlord who skimps on repairs. She has outlasted 3 iterations of every supplier on Chancery Lane and has opinions about all of them. "Mrs. Parr," you say, trying the name carefully. Mrs. Walton's expression shifts very slightly. 8 years she's been in that house. She runs the kitchen very efficiently. She does. A sip of tea. Her arrangement with the butcher on Bell Alley, Turner, isn't it? "I believe so." "She's been overcharging for meat for at least 5 years, Mrs. Walton says pleasantly. Mr. Caldwell, I suspect, has never checked the receipts against market prices. You look at her. "Oh, not a great deal," she says. "A penny here, 2p there. Enough to keep Turner willing to give her cousin's daughter employment, I've heard. A modest arrangement. Most bachelor households have similar arrangements. It's the cook's prerogative in a way." Another sip. "The question is whether it continues now that the household has a proper mistress." She looks at you over the rim of her cup. "This is what you are here for," that look says. "This, managing the house, managing Mrs. Parr, keeping the accounts honest." Anne Pryor, the new bride, has been listening to this with the expression of someone taking notes. How do you... She starts, then stops. How do you address it without making an enemy of the cook? Mrs. Walton finishes. Carefully, slowly, never directly if you can help it. You find a different supplier with better prices and you switch the order and you mention, in passing, that you found this excellent butcher on, wherever it is, and the prices are much more reasonable. And Mrs. Parr either adjusts or she doesn't, and if she doesn't, you have grounds to make a change. Without confrontation, Mrs. Fielding adds. Her voice is crisp, the voice of a physician's wife who's been running a household with clinical efficiency for 15 years. Confrontation with servants is always a loss. Even when you win, you lose. You file this away. The conversation moves to children. Mrs. Hammond's 3, Mrs. Walton's 7, 4, surviving, Mrs. Fielding's 2. Anne Pryor goes quiet in a particular way that means she's either pregnant already or hoping she isn't. The physicians recommend, Mrs. Fielding begins. The physicians recommend a great many things, Mrs. Walton interrupts, not unkindly but firmly. And they learn most of what they know from attending the sort of woman whose experience we do not share. For the practical matters, I have always found the midwife more useful than the physician. Mrs. Crooks, Mrs. Hammond asks. Mrs. Crooks, Mrs. Walton nods. She's been attending births in this parish for 20 years. She has seen everything, and she will tell you the truth. She looks at you, then at Anne Pryor, both of you equally new to all of this. Get her name, she says, before you need her. November comes in cold. The coal scuttle empties faster than the accounts allow for. You make adjustments, slightly smaller fires in the rooms that are used least. The parlour fire only lit in the evenings. The bedroom fire not lit at all, except on the very coldest nights, and then only for an hour before bed. Mr. Caldwell does not notice, or does not comment. He works in his study until 9 most evenings. He comes to bed when the fire is already out and the room is cold and you have been lying awake long enough that the sheets are finally warm. The first month of marriage is the month of adjustment. This is what everyone implied without saying. But no one prepared you for the particular texture of adjusting to another person's rhythms. The way his presence fills a room, even when he is not in it. The tobacco smell of his study that drifts under the door and through the house in the evenings. The sound of his footsteps on the stairs, which you learn to distinguish from every other sound. He is, you conclude after 5 weeks, a fair man, not warm, not cold, fair in the way of a man who has organized his life according to principles and applies those principles consistently. He expects the house to run smoothly and does not notice when it does. He notices when it doesn't. The one evening in November when Mrs. Parr served the mutton underdone, he mentioned it once, quietly, and that was all. The management of the house falls to you absolutely. You have it under control more or less within 6 weeks. Mrs. Parr's arrangement with the butcher, you found a different supplier on Fleet Lane, slightly cheaper, very good quality, through a recommendation from Mrs. Fielding. You switched the order gradually over a month and told Mrs. Parr you had found the new supplier through the market on Tuesday and thought his prices very good. Mrs. Parr said nothing. The old arrangement with Turner quietly ceased. You do not know if this is a victory. Bridget becomes, over these weeks, genuinely useful. She is quick and practical, and she has the particular gift of anticipating what will be needed before it is asked for. She keeps the fires going and the floors clean and the linens changed without needing to be reminded. She has also, you have noticed, been teaching herself to read from your copy of the prayer book, which you left on the parlour table one afternoon and came back to find in slightly different hands. You do not mention it. You leave the prayer book on the parlour table. December brings a first social engagement. Dinner at the home of Mr. Caldwell's colleague, a Mr. Harwood, who is a senior partner in an established law firm near Gray's Inn. His wife is Mrs. Harwood, Catherine, who is 32 and has 4 children and manages a household considerably grander than yours. The dinner is 8 people. The conversation is the conversation of law and business and the small political matters that circulate through this world. The current state of Parliament, the wars on the continent, the mercantile concerns that touch the legal practice. You have no opinion about these things, or rather you have opinions, but you have no forum in which to express them. The dinner table has its arrangement. The men talk about the world. The women talk about what? The children, the house, the parish, the social matters that circulate within a narrower radius. You listen to both conversations simultaneously. You've been doing this since childhood, learning to track 2 conversations, the one you are expected to contribute to and the one you're expected only to overhear. There's a great deal of money in that room. You can see it in the candles, wax, not tallow, extravagant, and in the silver on the table and in Mrs. Harwood's dress, which is a good 2 grades above yours and knows it. Mrs. Harwood is competent and polished, and entirely in command of her household, which performs itself seamlessly over 8 people without a single visible error. Afterward, in the carriage home, Mr. Caldwell says, "The Harwoods entertain well." Yes, you agree. We should think about doing the same. In the spring, perhaps, once you're settled. A dinner party. An actual dinner party, 8 people, which means a menu planned weeks in advance. Mrs. Parr managed to her absolute best. The good china brought out, the silver polished, the parlour arranged correctly, the food presented at the right temperature in the right sequence with the right interval between removes. You have never organised a dinner party. Of course, you say. I'll think about the spring. In the dark of the carriage, with the city rattling past outside, you are already thinking about it. January. You know before you're certain. The body knows first, before any definitive signs, the way the body always knows things, through a shift in the baseline, a change in the quality of a sensation you weren't previously aware of having. The smell of the kitchen, which has never bothered you before, begins to bother you. Not all smells, not the bread, not the coal smoke, but the meat. The smell of raw meat from the larder. A smell that you have previously not noticed becomes, in the second week of January, something that turns your stomach. You note this. You note also tiredness of a particular quality. Not the tiredness of too little sleep. That you know. This is something heavier, something that sits in your bones, that makes the simple act of getting out of bed feel like climbing. Mrs. Parr notices before you say anything. She arranges things, the timing of meals, what is kept in which part of the larder, whether or not certain things are being cooked when you're likely to be in the kitchen, without being asked to, without any discussion of why. She's done this before. She's been in this house through more than one employer. She knows. "Ginger," she says one morning, setting a cup of something on the kitchen table beside you. "For the mornings. Helps." You look at her. She meets your eyes. Hers are for the first time something other than carefully neutral. Something almost like, "I see you. I see this. We understand each other." Thank you, you say. She goes back to the range. The ginger does help slightly. You tell Mr. Caldwell in the 3rd week of January. He is in his study. You knock, you always knock, and he says, "Come in," and you tell him, standing in the doorway of his study with your hands folded in front of you. His face, a sequence you watch as it happens. First the plain surprise, a genuine moment of not having considered this, which is itself interesting. Then something else. Satisfaction, you think, the deep satisfaction of a man whose house is in order, whose arrangements are proceeding correctly. Good, he says, and then, with what for him is warmth, you will want to see a physician. I was thinking of a midwife, you say. A slight pause. We can afford a physician. Mrs. Walton recommended a midwife she knows. Mrs. Crooks. She has a great deal of experience. A midwife, he says again, as if testing the word. Many women prefer them for the lying in. Physicians don't always attend the birth directly. This last part is true. Most physicians of this period consider birth itself below their station. They consult, they advise, they attend complications. The birth itself is women's work and always has been. Mrs. Crooks is well regarded, he considers. He picks up his pen. He puts it down. As you wish, he says. You know more of these matters than I do. This is not always true of husbands. Some husbands make all decisions about everything, including their wives' medical care, including the birth of their children. You have been lucky in this particular instance, or you've argued correctly, and you know it. Thank you, you say. You go back to the parlour. You sit down. Your hands are shaking slightly, and you're not sure if it is relief or fear or just the particular shakiness of the first months of pregnancy, which Mrs. Walton told you about on the understanding that you would find out soon enough anyway. You think about Mrs. Walton's 7 children, 4 surviving, the arithmetic of it, February, March. The baby is a constant background presence now. Not uncomfortable yet, that comes later, but present. A weight, not physical yet, but gravitational. Everything organizes around it without quite announcing the reorganization. Your role in the household shifts without anyone deciding it has shifted. You are more sedentary, not because you have been told to be. No one has told you anything. But because the mornings are difficult and the afternoons drain faster, and by evening you are genuinely tired in a way that is different from before. Mrs. Parr runs the kitchen more independently. You note the accounts. You check the receipts. You do not go to Smithfield on Tuesday mornings anymore. Bridget takes on more. You have begun quietly to teach her to read properly, not from the prayer book anymore, but from a small primer you found in a second-hand bookshop on Fleet Street, spending 4p of your pin money on it and telling yourself it is a household investment. Bridget learns quickly. She reads with the focused intensity of someone who's been waiting for this. You do not tell Mr. Caldwell, not because you think he would object. You're not sure whether he would object, but because it is yours. The 4p, the teaching, the hour on Thursday mornings when Bridget sits at the kitchen table and works through the primer while Mrs. Parr pretends not to notice. It is, in the technical language of coverture, his 4p, his Thursday mornings, since all of your time belongs to the management of his household. But it is yours. Mrs. Crooks comes on a Tuesday in March. She is 60. She has a face like a piece of good leather, tanned, worked, capable of enormous expression or perfect neutrality as the occasion demands. She carries a bag. She has been carrying bags to houses where women are lying in for 35 years, and her bag contains things you will not recognize and things you will recognize and things whose purpose you will understand only later. She looks at you. She asks you to describe your experience so far. She asks questions that are technical and practical and entirely without sentiment. First child, she says? Yes. When was your last? She asks you several questions you answer with increasing directness, because this is not a room for being indirect, and she is not a woman who has patience for indirection in medical matters. She examines you with capable hands, cold hands initially. She apologizes for this, matter-of-factly, and rubs them together briefly before continuing. She is thorough. She is professional in a way of someone who has been professional at this for so long. That professionalism is simply what she is. August, she says when she's finished. End of July or beginning of August. The first ones sometimes take longer. Is that? It's fine. You're healthy. The baby's well positioned. You're young and strong. She sits back. Eat well. Keep warm. Don't do anything extremely strenuous in the last month. And send for me when the labour starts. Not when you think it might start. When it starts. How will I know? She looks at you with the expression of someone who's been asked this question by every first-time mother she has ever attended. You'll know, she says. Spring. The dinner party happens in May. 8 people. Mr. Caldwell's colleagues and their wives, the Harwoods included. The menu planned over 2 weeks of conversation with Mrs. Parr, who proves, when challenged properly, when presented with a real occasion that will reflect on the household, to be genuinely excellent. A white soup, a roast loin of veal, 2 removes, a dessert that involved a syllabub and some poached pears and a quantity of cream that made you wince when you looked at the accounts afterward, but that Mrs. Harwood described as delicate, and Mrs. Harwood is not given to easy praise. You sit at the foot of the dinner table, Mr. Caldwell at the head, the candles lit, wax. Tonight, you agree to the extravagance, the good china out, the silver polished by Bridget the day before, both of you spending an afternoon at the kitchen table with polishing cloths and the particular smell of the silver paste. You are 5 months along. The pregnancy is visible, enough that the women at the table know. They do not say so directly, this is not how things are said, but they are kind to you with the particular kindness directed at women in your situation. Mrs. Harwood asks if you are comfortable. Mrs. Hammond, who is also a guest, squeezes your hand briefly before sitting. The dinner goes well. It goes very well. After the guests have left, after the carriage sounds have faded up, Chancery Lane and Mrs. Parr has gone down to the kitchen, and Bridget has begun clearing, and Mr. Caldwell is standing by the window with a glass of port. He turns to you. Well done, he says. Just that. Well done. You have managed a household for 6 months, negotiated with a difficult cook, replaced a dishonest butcher supplier, kept the accounts balanced on a modest budget through a cold winter, learned the social requirements of your husband's professional world, and performed them correctly tonight for 8 guests. Well done. You smile. You have the smile ready. Thank you, you say. July. The heat. London in July 1753 is not a comfortable city under any circumstances. In the particular circumstances of being 8 months pregnant, it becomes something close to an endurance exercise. The streets smell worse in summer. The river at low tide puts off a smell that can be detected on Chancery Lane when the wind is wrong, and in July the wind is often wrong. The smells from the midden behind the house are more ambitious. The kitchen, with its fire always going for cooking, is a particular form of suffering. You are enormous. Not in a way that feels dignified or graceful. No one who has been 8 months pregnant in August heat has ever felt dignified. You feel like a building that someone has filled with water. You feel ungainly and heavy and perpetually overheated, and you would very much like to sit somewhere cool for 6 weeks without being asked to do anything at all. Mrs. Parr, who has seen several employers through this exact state, adjusts the kitchen to minimize its demands on you. She starts cooking earlier in the morning, before the day's heat builds, and keeps the afternoon preparations cold when possible. She does not require you in the kitchen. She sends Bridget up with cool water and the ginger tea she's been making since January. The room prepared for your lying in is the small bedroom on the second floor, the one that was your dressing room, now cleared and set up for the purpose. It has been transformed over the last weeks. The good linen sheets, the supply of clean cloths, the washstand fully stocked, the fire ready to be lit even in summer because the lying-in room must be warm. This is non-negotiable. The cold is the enemy after birth. Mrs. Crooks has been told she will come when called. She has attended to everything in her visits. She has come 4 more times since March, checking and advising and answering your questions with the same calm directness as always. The questions you've asked her are not the questions you could ask anyone else. Not Mr. Caldwell, not Mrs. Hammond, who is sympathetic but sometimes more frightening than reassuring. Not your mother, who would tell you what you needed to hear and not one word more. You asked Mrs. Crooks about the women who don't survive it. She looked at you for a long moment. It happens, she said. More with the fever than the birth itself, usually. The fever that comes after. If it comes, you send for me immediately. Not tomorrow, not when it gets worse. Immediately. And the birth itself? You're young and well built and healthy. She said this as if it were a medical assessment, which it was. The odds are in your favour, but nothing is certain, but the odds are in your favour. This is what you have then. The odds, the particular consolation of probability. You know the stories, you've always known them. Mrs. Walton's 4 surviving children out of 7 means 3 who didn't survive childhood. But you know from Mrs. Walton's passing references that her 3 losses included 1 who did not survive the birth. Her 3rd, a boy. She is 63. She's been managing this knowledge for 40 years. You think about that at night in the enormous heat of July, lying in the bed that now requires an entire landscape of pillows to make comfortable. The odds are in your favour. August 3rd, 1753. You wake at 2 in the morning with the certain knowledge that Mrs. Crooks was right. You'll know. The pain is not like anything you have felt before. It is not sharp. Not yet. It is deep, a pressure from inside that moves in long, slow waves, building and releasing like the tide, like the river. Everything comes back to the river in this city. You lie still through the first 3 waves, counting the interval. Bridget is asleep in the room across the landing. Mrs. Parr is in the basement. Mr. Caldwell is asleep beside you. You get up carefully, which is not easy in your current state, and you go and wake Bridget. Get Mrs. Crooks, you say. Now. Bridget is out of bed and dressed and out the door with the unthinking efficiency of a person who has also been waiting for this moment. You hear her quick steps on the stairs, the front door. Then nothing but London's night sounds and the approaching wave of another contraction. You will not describe what the next 14 hours are in any tidy way, because there is no tidy way. You will describe it as being in a small room. The lying-in room, the fire now lit despite the August heat, the windows closed per Mrs. Crooks's instructions, with Mrs. Crooks and Bridget, and for 2 hours in the middle, Mrs. Hammond, who appears without being asked and sits in the corner and does not say anything that is not useful. The room smells of blood and hot cloth, and the caudal Mrs. Parr sends up every 2 hours a warm drink made from ale and eggs and sugar and spices, sweet and slightly nauseating and utterly sustaining. Mrs. Crooks's hands are always warm now. You do not know when they became warm. Her voice is constant, low, giving instructions that you follow because following instructions is, at this point, the only thing available to you. Bear down, breathe, not yet, now, rest, good. There is a moment, somewhere around hour 10, when the pain is so complete and so total and so entirely beyond anything you planned, for that you understand viscerally and permanently something about all the women who have been in this room before you. Not this room specifically, but this room. Every lying-in room in every house in London and beyond. Every woman in every century who lay on this same specific bed and felt this same specific thing, and knew, in the way you know it now, that this is what the body is for, and the body does not care at all about your opinions about that. Your body is not yours right now. Your body is doing something ancient, something it was doing before there were countries or laws or words for what it was doing, and you are just inside it, following instructions. Bear down, breathe, not yet, now, rest. At 4 in the afternoon, on August 3rd, 1753, Mrs. Crooks places a small person onto your chest. The small person is red and outraged and very much alive, and has a quantity of dark hair plastered damply to a head that is improbably small. Mrs. Crooks says something. You cannot hear her for a moment. Then you can. A girl, she says, very healthy. The girl is on your chest. She's the smallest person you've ever seen. She's approximately the weight of a large loaf of bread. She is screaming. Bridget is crying silently in the corner. Mrs. Hammond is not crying, but has the expression of a woman who is strongly considering it. You are not crying. You're looking at this small person on your chest and trying to process the distance between the world as it was 14 hours ago and the world as it is right now, which is a distance that has no unit of measurement. Hello, you say, to no one specific, to the room, to the small person. She keeps screaming. This is correct. This is what healthy babies do. Mr. Caldwell is informed. He comes to the door. Men do not enter the lying-in room during the immediate aftermath. This is convention. And is told through the door that he has a daughter, that both are healthy, that he can see them in the morning. His voice through the door says, "Thank God." 2 words, entirely inadequate, entirely enough. The baby is named Charlotte. You choose the name. Mr. Caldwell agrees. The agreement itself is a kind of gift. There are husbands who would simply decide, who would present the name as established fact rather than asking. He asks. Charlotte is baptized at St. Dunstan in the West on August 15th. You're not there. The churching ceremony, your formal return to church, does not happen until you have recovered enough, which takes another month. Mrs. Walton, who was present at half the baptisms in the parish, says, "They're always smaller than you think, and then they grow." She's right about the growing. Charlotte, at 3 weeks, is eating and sleeping and screaming with the systematic dedication of a small creature whose only occupation is being alive. At 2 months, she's begun to notice the world, her eyes tracking movement, her hands grasping at whatever comes within reach. You're exhausted. Completely, thoroughly, in your bones, exhausted. in a way that is entirely different from the exhaustion of running a household or the exhaustion of pregnancy. This is the exhaustion of being permanently on call, of waking every 3 hours, of being needed with a totality that admits no negotiation. Mrs. Parr cooks. Bridget keeps the house. Mr. Caldwell leaves for his office at 9 and returns at 7. You feed Charlotte. You change Charlotte. You walk Charlotte up and down the small parlour at 3 in the morning when she will not sleep, and you have run out of lullabies and you're so tired you cannot locate the edges of yourself. And sometimes at 3 in the morning, walking back and forth on the parlour carpet, Charlotte finally asleep against your shoulder, the city quiet outside. Sometimes in those moments you feel something you don't have a word for. Not happiness exactly. Something more primary than happiness. The feeling of being in the exact place where you're supposed to be, doing the exact thing you're supposed to be doing, even though, or perhaps because, no one assigned you to it, no contract specifies it, no law requires it. This is yours. The legal reality has not changed. Charlotte, under the law of coverture, belongs to her father. If Mr. Caldwell decided to send her away, to a wet nurse, to a boarding school, to a relative, you would have no legal standing to prevent it. But at 3 in the morning, with her weight against your shoulder and her small, impossible breath against your neck, the law feels very far away. The love, on the other hand, is exactly as close as she is. The church and ceremony happens on a Sunday in September. This is the ritual you didn't know about, or knew about in the abstract, the way you knew about a great many things in the abstract. You come to church after the birth to be formally received back into the congregation, to give thanks for your survival, to be, in a liturgical sense, cleansed. There is something in the ceremony you did not expect to find, the word thanksgiven. Not purification, not the Old Testament logic of women being unclean after childbirth. The English church reformers moved away from that. The prayer book says thanksgiving. You give thanks. You sit in the Caldwell pew, Charlotte beside you with her nurse, and the Reverend Pemberton reads the psalm, and you think about August 3rd and the 14 hours, and Mrs. Crooks's warm hands and the moment she placed Charlotte on your chest. Thanks seems right. Thanks seems, in fact, insufficient. October. Charlotte is 2 months old. You begin to manage the household again, gradually. Mrs. Parr and Bridget have held everything together, flawlessly, you note, which tells you something about their actual competence versus their performance of requiring your supervision. You will keep this thought. The accounts are balanced. The house is clean. The winter coal has been ordered at a price that is, you note, slightly better than last year's, which means Bridget has been learning things from the marketing trips you used to take with Mrs. Parr. You note this also. November. Mrs. Hammond invites you to tea again. You bring Charlotte bundled against the cold, and the two of you sit in her parlour while Mrs. Hammond's children orbit the room, and Charlotte observes them from your arms with the expression of someone watching a particularly interesting experiment. Mrs. Hammond says, "You did well," you say. "I had good help." You chose good help. She looks at Bridget, who is sitting in the corner with the baby. That one, she came to you. She was already in the house. She's very capable. A pause. Better than that. Bridget is reading to the oldest Hammond child. A story, quietly in the corner, from a small book she keeps in her apron pocket. The child is listening with complete attention. Yes, you say. She is. Winter again. Charlotte's first winter. A cold one. The pipes freeze twice, requiring expeditions to the water pump on the corner, that take on the quality of military operations. Mr. Caldwell adds a second coal delivery to the weekly order without being asked, which is, in the language, of a man who manages primarily through not commenting, a kind of care. You learn his language over this second winter. The things he does that mean something without saying something. The glass of wine left on your side of the dinner table, poured without asking before you've said you wanted any. The fire in the parlour lit earlier than usual on the evenings you've been in there with Charlotte. Not romantic, not warm in the way that word means in stories, but reliable, consistent. The steady application of care in the form of practical attention. You have known less than this. Spring. Charlotte is 7 months old and investigating the world with her whole body, rolling, reaching, putting things in her mouth that should not be put in mouths, achieving forward motion by a form of locomotion that involves more rolling than crawling. She needs watching every moment. Bridget, who has appointed herself Charlotte's unofficial supervisor, tracks her across the parlour floor with the patient attention of a shepherd. When Charlotte, moving at her usual speed in the direction of the fireplace grate, reaches the edge of the hearthrug, Bridget's hand is already there. Without drama, without alarm, just there. You see Mrs. Walton's watch the servants in a different light now, not just as a caution, as a recognition of something that women in service have been doing forever, the quiet, constant, largely unacknowledged labour of keeping the small ones alive. You're 21 years old. You've been married for 2 years. You have a daughter who can stand briefly while holding onto furniture, and who says 4 words with great certainty, and several more with the ambiguity of the very young. You run a household. You balance accounts. You manage 2 servants who are both, in different ways, more capable than they were when you arrived. You attend Sunday service and Thursday teas and occasional dinner parties. You are learning, slowly in the way of someone learning a language by immersion, the world of your husband's professional life, the legal matters that come to the dinner table in their sanitized social form, the clients who are referenced by initial, the cases that must not be discussed. You've learned that Mr. Caldwell James, who you've called James for almost 2 years now with decreasing strangeness, is a man of specific principles. He does not take cases he considers without merit. He has turned away clients. You know this because of what he says at dinner occasionally, and because of what Bridget, who hears more than anyone gives her credit for, has once or twice mentioned in passing. He is fair. He is consistent. He is not, and will never be, warm in the way that Charlotte is warm, in the way that your mother was warm when she pressed her mouth against your hair at the front door. But he is fair. In 1753, in London, that is not nothing. You are pregnant again. You know before you tell him. You know before you're certain. You recognize the shifts now. The way the kitchen smell changes. The quality of the tiredness. Mrs. Crooks comes on a Tuesday in March. She says, December. You say, the odds? She says, better the second time. This is not entirely true, but it is the most useful thing to say. The second lying in is in December. A boy. 17 hours. Mrs. Crooks's warm hands. The caudle. The fire. Mrs. Hammond again, in the corner. The boy arrives at midnight on December 14th in a storm that brings hail against the windows and makes the fire flare wildly with every gust down the chimney. He is loud. He is very large. He has Mr. Caldwell's long face and your father's eyes. Healthy as a horse, Mrs. Crooks says. She looks almost pleased, which is the most expression you've ever seen on her face at one time. You name him Thomas for your brother. Mr. Caldwell, through the door, says, "A son." And then, after a pause, "Is Mary—" "Both well, sir," says Bridget. A longer pause. "Good." He says, "Good." You hear him go back down the hall. The footsteps stop at the top of the stairs. Bridget opens the door slightly, meets his eye, closes it again. "He's crying," she says to you, very quietly. You look at her. "I'm just saying," she says. 5 months after Thomas's birth. May. Spring. Genuine spring. The particular spring of a year when winter has been especially punishing, and the green of the new leaves seems almost aggressive in its insistence. Mrs. Walton invites you to walk on Hampstead Heath. This requires more organisation than it should. Mrs. Parr to manage the household, Bridget to mind Charlotte and Thomas, Mr. Caldwell to be informed you will be out for the afternoon, the correct clothes for walking on the heath which are different from the correct clothes for Chancery Lane. The carriage takes you north through the city, through the noise of it, the stench of it, the crowded, impossible density of it, and then suddenly, abruptly, as if someone has drawn a line, the city stops and there is sky. Open sky. Not the narrow strip of grey between rooftops that you've been looking at for 2 years. Actual sky. Enormous. Cloud-piled. Moving. You step out of the carriage onto the heath and stand there for a moment and just breathe. The air is different here. Cool and green and alive with the smell of grass and something herby and indefinite. Some combination of wild plants in the spring warmth. There are birds, not the scrappy pigeons of the city streets, but larks, actually larks, up in that enormous sky above you, doing the thing larks do, hovering and singing in that particular penetrating note that travels downward. Mrs. Walton walks, as she does everything, with complete assurance. She has been coming to the heath for 40 years. You walk beside her. Below, south, is London. From up here, from this height, you can see it as you cannot see it from inside it. The city is a thing, a complete thing, not a confusion of streets and smells, and people, but an entity, a shape. The dome of St. Paul's rising above the rooftops exactly as everyone said it would, visible from miles. The glitter of the river threading through everything. The brown-grey smudge of coal smoke sitting above the city like a permanent atmosphere. 500,000 people living in that, working in it, loving and quarrelling and dying in it, trading and cheating and praying and mourning, giving birth on August nights in small lying-in rooms with the fire too hot and the windows closed. The ships in the river, tiny from here. You can just make them out if you look. The clustering masts at the lower reaches where the big cargo ships anchor, waiting for the tide. You have been in London for 2 years of marriage, and 19 years before that, and this is the first time you have seen it. "I come up here," Mrs. Walton says beside you, "when it gets too much." You look at her. "Everything," she says. "The house, the accounts, the children, though, my, children are grown now, they leave a different kind of accounting." A pause. 40 years of managing everything invisibly inside that. She gestures, a short economical movement at the sprawl below. And nobody writes it down. No histories of the women who kept the houses running while the men were making history. But we were there. She looks at you. We are there. The larks keep singing above you. The river glitters below. My mother's mother, you say, was in London when the old St. Paul's stood, before the fire. Yes, Mrs. Walton says. Mine too, something like mine too. You stand there for a long time looking at the city. Something settles in you, on the heath. looking at London from above. Not acceptance exactly. You have not been given the kind of situation that requires acceptance in the way of surrendering something you want. You have been given a life that is, by the measures available to you in 1753, a good one, a fair husband, healthy children, a house you have made into something that works. A cook who now, in the 3rd year, gives you something very close to respect. A housemaid who reads. But something settles. The understanding, perhaps, that the structures around your life, the legal ones, the social ones, the theological ones that told you in church to obey and serve, are structures that were made by people at particular moments in history, for particular reasons that had more to do with property and inheritance and the management of power than with anything divine or natural. They are not permanent. You cannot see this, of course, from inside 1753. You cannot see the 1882 that is ahead. You cannot see the Married Women's Property Act, the suffragettes, the slow and painful and incomplete dismantling of the system you are living inside. But you can feel, up here on the heath with the larks singing and the river shining below, that the structures have edges, that they are structures, not geography, that the difference between what is and what should be is not an infinite distance. This thought is, in itself, a kind of radical act. Mrs. Walton, who is 63 and has been having this thought for 40 years, seems to read it on your face. Yes, she says simply, like that. The evenings. This is what they look like. The ordinary evenings of 1754 in the house on Chancery Lane. By 7, Mr. Caldwell is home from his office. He goes to his study. He works until 9. By 7, Charlotte has been fed and bathed and put to bed by Bridget, and Thomas has been fed and is sleeping in the cradle near the nursery fire. By 7, Mrs. Parr has the dinner ready and the kitchen cleaned, and has gone to her own supper in the servants' hall. By 7 you are in the parlour, the fire is going, the candles, tallow, on ordinary evenings, you save the wax for company, are lit. The room is warm and small and yours in the practice sense, in the sense that matters. You are reading a novel, Clarissa, which Mrs. Hammond lent you and which you have been reading in the evenings for a month, which is the only pace at which novels can be read when your days are what your days are. The book is, you think, about the question you have been living, about what happens to women inside the structures that surround them, about what it costs and what it means and where the edges are. You're on page 346. Mr. Caldwell comes out of the study at 9. He pours a glass of port. He sits in the chair across from yours. "How are the children?" he asks. "Well, Charlotte said a sentence today. 7 words. I counted." A slight smile. "What did she say?" "She said, 'I do not like this porridge at all.'" The smile broadens. "Specific." "She is very specific." You eat supper, the two of you, at the small table in the dining room. Mrs. Parr has left cold meats and pickles and bread. You eat and talk, the particular conversation of two people who share a house and children and an increasing familiarity, if not yet the intimacy of the novels you read. After supper, he goes back to his papers. You go back to Clarissa. Charlotte is asleep down the hall. Thomas is sleeping. The house is warm. London is doing its night things outside the windows. This is not the life you imagined. At 19, standing in your room on Cheapside for the last time, looking at the crack in the ceiling. But then, you couldn't have imagined it from there. You didn't have enough information. You have more information now. What you know at 22, the law does not protect you. The law, in fact, has nothing to do with you, in the sense of acknowledging your existence as a separate entity. You are covered. You are protected. Those are different things. The household accounts are yours to manage and not yours to own. The money passes through your hands and stays his. This does not stop you from being good with it. You have a talent for this, for seeing the shape of a budget, for knowing where flexibility exists and where it doesn't. You have found in the past year almost 8 shillings of monthly savings through the combination of Mrs. Parr's reformed arrangements, Bridget's improved marketing, and your own attention to the weekly accounts. 8 shillings a month is nearly £5 a year. You put 4 of those £5 into a small box in the back of the linen press, which is your domain and no one else's, not hidden, not dishonest. Simply put aside. Your mother's mother did this. Your mother does this. This is one of the oldest domestic traditions in England. The small saving, the pin money, the tiny margin of financial existence that does not depend on a man's mood. The other £1 you spent on books, Mrs. Hammond's recommendation mostly, histories, novels, the occasional pamphlet on subjects that interest you. The pamphlets are the most interesting. The current debates about women's education, about the conditions of the poor, about the reform of various systems are circulating in printed form, and they are cheap, and they are available to anyone who goes to the right bookseller. Bridget reads them after you do. She has opinions about all of them. She has opinions you've started to ask for. What you know about Mr. Caldwell, he is a man of his time, entirely and completely a man of his time, which means he does not question the arrangements he has inherited. He does not see coverture as a system or a choice or an injustice. He sees it as the way things are, the way the sky is grey and the river flows east. It would not occur to him to question it, any more than he questions the ecclesiastical calendar or the common law of property. He is kind within this. He is not cruel. He does not use the power the law gives him to damage or diminish. You have known women who could not say the same. Mrs. Hammond's sister-in-law, who came to tea once in the autumn, with bruises on her wrists that she did not mention, and everyone did not mention, and who went home afterward without anyone having said anything about it. The woman at St. Dunstan's, the one whose husband you have seen drink himself to the edges of functionality, whose children always look slightly hungry, whose clothes are always slightly insufficient for the weather. The law does not help either of them. The law says his wife is his, to care for, or to mismanage, or to damage, as he sees fit, as long as he doesn't go too far, and too far is a line drawn in different places by different magistrates, and in any case the wife would have to bring the complaint, which she cannot do independently, which means the husband would have to bring a complaint about himself. You know all of this. You carry it with you as a kind of awareness, the map of a territory you live in and do not fully own. What you know about Charlotte. She's 2 years old, and she has opinions about everything. She communicates these opinions with the combination of words and physical expressiveness of someone for whom language is a recent and imperfect tool. She likes the colour blue, and she does not like porridge, and she is deeply attached to a particular rag doll that Bridget made for her last winter. She has your forehead, and her father's chin, and her grandmother Whitmore's eyes. You are preparing a world for her that is the only world you have. It is, you think, on the evenings when Clarissa is closed and Charlotte is sleeping, and the city is quieter than usual. It is a world that will require her to be clever, not in the way of men who are educated at schools and universities and trained to use their cleverness in the public arenas of law and commerce and government. in the way of women. The cleverness of navigating, of managing, of maintaining your own sense of self inside a structure that is not designed to see you. You're going to teach her everything you know, not from Clarissa, or not only from Clarissa, from the accounts, from the marketing, from the management of Mrs. Parr and Bridget and the social machinery of Thursday teas and Sunday services, from the conversations at Mrs. Walton's table where the information about the world circulates in female form outside the official channels, the world as it is and how to move through it. October. Charlotte is learning to count. She counts the steps on the stairs. 14, she announces every time she descends, with the satisfaction of a scientific confirmation. Thomas is walking improbably at 10 months. He crosses the parlour floor with the single-minded concentration of a small person who has decided walking is going to happen whether or not he is actually stable enough. The accounts for October show 1 shilling and 4p savings over last month. A new supplier for candles, recommended by Mrs. Fielding, who is both cheaper and better quality than the previous one. This is the kind of intelligence that moves through the women's network, this specific, practical, money-saving information about London's commercial life that is transmitted at Thursday teas and after Sunday service and occasionally in whispered asides at dinner parties. Mrs. Walton at Thursday tea says, "You've become formidable, Mary." "I've become organised, you say." "Same thing." She sips her tea. "At 22, I was 22 once. I was not organised." She looks at Charlotte, who's engaged in an argument with one of Mrs. Hammond's daughters about the correct way to sit a doll. She'll be formidable too. She will, you agree, November, cold again. The house on Chancery Lane is warm tonight. The fires are going in the parlour and the kitchen and the bedroom. Yes, the bedroom too, Mr. Caldwell having said last week. Something about it being a good thing to be comfortable in winter without requiring elaboration, which you took for what it was. Charlotte is asleep. Thomas is asleep. That deep and absolute sleep of the very young who have spent the day moving as fast as their bodies will go and have simply run out. You are in bed. The room is warm. The candle is burning on the washstand. The book is on the table. You've finished Clarissa and have started something else. Something your mother sent with a note that said, "I thought of you without explaining why," which is entirely typical of her. The sounds from Chancery Lane are quiet now. Not silent, nothing in London is ever silent, but quieted to their late-night version. The occasional cart, a voice somewhere. The distant bell of St. Dunstan's marking the half-hour. Mr. Caldwell is already asleep. You blow out the candle. In the dark you think about the women on the heath. Not the specific women, not Mrs. Walton and yourself and the larks and the view of the city, but the general women, the ones who have been living this same life, managing, navigating, loving children into existence and existence into lives, for as long as London has been London. Before the Marriage Act of 1753 that is even now settling into law, changing how weddings work, requiring churches and registers and witnesses. Before that, marriages were made with a word and a ring and a witness and a willingness, in the cobbled alleys outside Fleet Prison, where the irregular marriage trade did its brisk and constant business. Fleet marriages, no banns, no waiting, no father's permission. Just 2 people and a clergyman and 5 minutes. The Act changed that, or is changing it. These things take time to change, the structures of the world. They change in Parliament and then they change in practice. Slowly, unevenly in the gap between law and life. You are living in the gap, the future. You cannot see it from here. No one can. But you're beginning to understand that here is not permanent, that the woman who lies in this bed in November 1754, the woman who is covered, who does not legally exist, who has no right to her own earnings or her own children or her own signature on a contract, that this woman is temporary, that the law that made her will be unmade, that her granddaughter or her great-granddaughter will live in a different arrangement, not easily, not quickly, not without women writing things down and arguing and organising and insisting. But it will happen. Charlotte is asleep down the hall. Charlotte, with her opinions about porridge and her deep commitment to the colour blue in her grandmother's eyes and her 17 words, Charlotte will live into the 19th century. You don't know this. You're lying in the dark in November 1754, and you cannot know this. But Charlotte was born healthy and strong, and she is, at 2, gloriously, loudly, specifically herself. Whatever the world gives her, she will argue with it. The fire settles. Thomas makes a small sound in his sleep, one of those sounds that babies make, half word and half dream, that means nothing and everything at once. The city is quiet. Chancery Lane. The lawyer's street. The street where the law is written down and argued over and interpreted and revised. Where men in dark coats walk to their offices every morning, carrying the machinery of the system in leather folders and turn it over in their minds and sometimes, find the places where it can be improved. You live on this street, inside the law, subject to it, covered by it, legally invisible within it, and somehow, against all of that, present, warm and fed and warm and present, with children asleep down the hall and accounts balanced in the ledger on the kitchen table, and a small box in the back of the linen press with £4 in it. That is yours in the only way anything is yours. Mrs. Parr is asleep in the servants' quarters. Bridget who reads now, who has opinions about pamphlets, is asleep across the landing. The house breathes. You close your eyes. The day recounts itself without requiring you to attend to it. The morning. Charlotte's counting on the stairs, 14 steps, 14, announced as always with scientific satisfaction. The afternoon, the accounts, the new candle supplier, the letter to your mother that you will finish tomorrow. The evening, supper, Clarissa's replacement, the fire, the ordinary machinery of a life, and underneath it, the thing that does not make the accounts, the love that runs through all of it. For Charlotte and Thomas and Bridget and even Mrs. Parr in her imperious way, and for your mother on Cheapside with her ink-stained finger and her silence that tells you everything, and for Mrs. Walton, who's been formidable for 40 years and expects you to be also, and for the small specific life you have built in this house, which is not yours in law, which is yours in every way that matters. Your hands in the dark feel their own weight. They have been working all day. The accounts, the housekeeping, the picking up of Thomas, the soothing of Charlotte. They are, you notice, becoming your mother's hands. The slight roughening, the capability, these are your hands. Sleep comes the way it comes at the end of long days, slowly and then completely, the way the tide comes in. Not a sudden stop, but a gradual submersion. Thought after thought going under, softening at the edges, dissolving. The last thought, almost. The crack in the ceiling of your old room on Cheapside, whether it is still there, that long diagonal line running from window to chimney breast. Whether Anne, who has the room now, lies in the dark and traces it with her eyes and what she thinks about. Whether she is afraid of what comes next. You would tell her, it is complicated. It is not what you expected, and not nothing, and not finished. You would tell her, watch the servants, and after that, watch everything. You would tell her, the odds mostly are in your favour, and then the thought goes under too. London breathes outside. The fire settles to its last orange glow. Charlotte, 14 stairs away, sleeps with the absolute confidence of someone who has counted the stairs and knows exactly where she is. Thomas breathes. You sink. The centuries will go over this house like weather. The boards you sleep on now will be different boards. The walls will be replastered. The street outside will change and change and change again until what is there is barely recognizable as what was there. But the river will still flow, and people will still lie down in the dark at the end of long days and let the noise fade and feel the particular weight of their hands, and think about the ones asleep down the hall, and about their mothers, and about what they have managed to build inside a world that was not built for them. This does not change. Some things do not change. Let them come, the centuries. Let them bring what they bring. Let the law revise itself slowly, painfully, incompletely, towards something better. You have done the work of today. The accounts are balanced. The children are warm. The hands have rested. That is enough. Let sleep take you. Let the room go dark. Let the city quiet around you until it is just a sound, just a heartbeat, just the river moving in the dark below the bridge. Warm enough, safe enough, enough. Good night.